Hi there, my name is B. Welcome to my channel. Let's continue with the Let's Make a Stealth game. We are going to close the dialogue system today, and we're going to do a few more things on the system. One of them will be fix something that I left in the last episode, and we're going to combine the dialogue system on one of the interactive objects that you can place on the environment. On the last episode, we have this intro dialogue that plays as soon as you press play, because it's attached on the player controller and it plays on the begin play. So every time you press play, it will play. This is not properly done for an intro dialogue. It should be in a different place, but I'm showing just an example. So this dialogue system on the last episode, we could see the dialogue being played between the blue robot and another NPC that we hear, like we don't know what it is. So we have the options, and then we have some sentences. Yeah, it keeps playing, and then there is this dialogue between the two of them. And when everything finishes, we couldn't move the player again, but now we can. So we're gonna fix that. And for that, we're gonna use something very, very handy that I really recommend, which is event delegates. So we're gonna have an event that is raised by the dialogue system as soon as the dialogue finishes. And the player controller is gonna be subscribed to that event and do whatever it needs to do. I have here the player controller C++ class. And in the begin play, I have the intro dialogue pointer, which I initialize the dialogue, and using this function, I block the movement of the player. The intro dialogue is just a pointer to a data table, and it's declared as a U property, so I can add it to the blueprint. What happens here? I have this event, and this player controller is listening to this event. When the dialogue is completed, it will do this function, this handle, and it will remove the dialogue, the event, and set this to false so the player controller can move. So we need to add this event delegate on the in-game UI, because the UI is the one that makes all the logic behind the dialogue system. Let's see how we can do that. It's very simple. Right at the top, we have to declare the delegate. And in this case, it's a delegate, which is basically how are you going to declare the function that is going to handle the event. It doesn't have any parameters. If you want any kind of parameters, for example, you want to send a boolean or an int or whatever, this right here is slightly different. You need one parameter. The Unreal documentation is very clear, so it's easy to transform this into one parameter, 2 parameters, 3 parameters. I don't know how many you can add. But okay, so first we need to declare the delegate. For some reason, we need to put F and then the name of the delegate. And now we have to, let's say, declare the event that is going to use that delegate. So it has to be a new property. If we add blueprint assignable, we can use it on blueprints as well. And now all we have to do is to call this on dialog complete when we decide we want to launch the event. So in this case, if you remember this interact, which is when the player presses the E key, is gonna do the logic. And from the last video, we have this current state where to check where the status of the dialogue system was. So we have 2 places where we want to add this broadcast or send this event. One is when the text has been completed and there is no messages. So when all the lines of code of the line of dialogue has been completed. In that case, so right here, we send the on dialog completed broadcast. just one, and the other one is when we are waiting to select an answer from the player, and there is no, let's say, there is no more options, or there is no option, then we send that on dialogue completed. So with this, here this only will be called when those in those two instances. So we can complete that. Very simple, very powerful. I really recommend to use events because they're very easy to use, and there's no need to use the tick with a flag or something like that to detect when this dialogue has been completed. So events are great. I really like them. For the second part of this video, we're going to see how to integrate this dialogue system in an interactive object. In this example map, I have this door, which is an interactive object, and when the player is close to it and we press the E key, we will see a dialogue. So we go close to it, we can press play, and we have this player dialogue with 2 lines. Yeah, we can integrate that. So the door doesn't do anything, that will be for another tutorial, and it's just an example. So let me show you this interactive example. This interactive object, I call it interactive with dialogue, which extends from a class that I already have, extends from a class called interactive, basic interactive, that I created in one of my first tutorials. I'll show you the code, and this is like an extension from that class, because that basic class has some elements like the root scene, an interactive mesh to represent elements, a look at point, just in case we want the player to look at some point on the object, and an interactive collision. So this is the representation. All of this is from the basic class. And the important one is this interactive collision, which is a box collision, which has some functions to detect if the player is close or not. So the only difference for this one is I had to add this dialogue EU property with this data table that I created new, which has only 1 row with 2 messages. No message options because it's just the blue robot talking. Both elements are integrated, so this dialogue system is great for use it in general places. Let's go to the code and let me show you how this works. So first let's take a look at the just simplet interactive with dialogue, which extends from interactive base, and it has similar to on the main player controller. It has this EU property, so we can add this to the interactive with dialogue. It has again a handle for that event, and this is to just detect if we are interacting, just not to do this over and over again when the player press the E key. We override the function interact, which is the basic interact function that is called when the player is inside the trigger and press the E key. Let's go to the CPP and you will see that it's basically similar to the main player controller. On the interact function, if we are interacting, we don't do anything. So this will only happen the first time, or when this is false. If we have the reference to the current player controller, which is on the parent class, and if this is not null, as usual, I like to have this kind of checks. It's important, otherwise the editor will crash, and yeah. If this is the first time, we set this to true, so we don't do anything until this is false again. We do the same. We block the movement of the playing controller. We initialize the dialogue with the pointer that we have there on the header. And we subscribe to the same event, so using the handle. And right here, very simple, we check again the reference of the current player controller is there. We unblock the movement and we remove that event. I do this because what could happen is if we move from this interactive object, if this is still listening to that and we're using another different, it can happen weird things, so it's better to make sure to desubscribe to these events when we know we're not going to use it for now. We set this to false, which means we are done with this interactive and we can use this. So if the player is inside, if the dialogue ends, everything just ends and we are still inside, if we press interact again, it will do this for the first time. Let me show you where I call this interact. I do this on the main player controller because on the main player controller is where I have all the input. And the input, I have when I press interact. If I go to interact, what I have is a reference to my character. Then I have get interactive. And I finally I call on interact. This is a getter that I have on main character because when we're inside the interactive object, the interactive object will send the reference to itself to the character, not the player controller. This is one way to do it. I could just have the reference right inside here, but there's no need. So if I go to this function, you will see this is simply current interactive. This is the reference. So again, when I press interact, the letter key, if this is not null, this means we are inside one. I will call interact. This interact, which is the basic, not the child, will do whatever it needs to do. And because the interact with dialogue extends from this interactive base, it will call this interact. So I don't need to do any casting or anything like that. This is just a basic function that all the interactive are gonna have, and each interactive that we create will override this and do whatever it needs to do. Finally, let me show you the interactive base again, how it works. You will see we have these basic elements: through the scenes, the mesh, the lookout point, and the interactive collision. Then we have the reference to the current player controller and the current character, so we can access from the tiles. These are the begin overlap and end overlap that are the events for the interactive collision. And we have enable and disable, so we can enable and disable the interactive base from outside or whenever we don't need to. And the virtual void interact. And the CPP is very simple. As usual, we create the sub-objects. We have its sub-objects, and important, we have these two events, begin overlap and overlap. And then on begin overlap and end overlap, we do the normal checks. Is enabled? Yes. Okay, we can continue. We cast this to the current character. And here's how I was talking about the current character. We sent a reference to this interactive basic, which will be stored in that current interactive. When we have end overlap, we do the same. We clear the reference, so it's null, and we clear the current player controller. Set enables nothing to see here, it's just enable and disable or disable the collision. And interact does pretty much nothing, it's just the basic function. The only thing is if it's not enabled, it's not gonna work. So this is my template. I use this interactive base in many of my projects because it's very handy for me. So I tend to create this the first thing. Every time I know I am going to have some kind of interaction on the environment, I create this one. And then I work with tiles. Like this example, directive with dialogue. Another way to do it is with interfaces, but in my case I find these for this type of objects more easy for me, but interface will work similarly. You will create an interface with some basic functions, and then you will create object that implements that interface. Now let me show you again quickly how to create this interactive. So what I usually do is go to the class, so game logic, interactive, and then I select the interactive, right click, create blueprint class based on interactive dialog, and then I will place that in a folder. So I'm gonna create a second version, 2, and create blueprint, and this is the basic element. So then I will just select, for example, a column, let's say, or the door. You want the door? The door. Then I will adjust this wherever I need to. So I don't know. Maybe I'll put the trigger there, so we can only go in front of this part of the column. Depends on you. And finally, because this is with dialog, I will need this reference. So I can select the one that I created, interactive example. I can show you as well how to create that data table. So we need to go to right click, mix, then data table, and it's gonna ask me which one. In this case is dialog NPC, which should have a different name, but this was created in the beginning for NPCs, then I decided I can use it for something else, so yeah, not an accurate name. Then we press OK, and yeah, OK for interactive. Then we can start creating rows. And for example, let's say this is an interactive. Yeah, and we can use this right there. And if now I put this here, then I press play, I need to skip this dialog because remember, this is going to happen always. So we should probably have a different object to trigger this intro, which will be another example. You could create a trigger with a dialog, and when the game starts and this guy moves a little bit and is on top of a trigger, you can then trigger that, because otherwise this is very annoying. Now, as you can see, I am close, and it's doing the lookup, by the way, because I have that enabled. Yeah, so this is how it will work. And that's it for today's tutorial, and with this we wrap up the dialogue part, the dialogue series. I haven't decided just yet for the next one what will it be, but I'm thinking I'm gonna probably close this series soon and just show you a few more things related to this minigame that I created. Thank you very much for watching. Please share, subscribe, like, it helps. See you next time on the next video. Bye!